Maybe we should turn on the lights. Sure. Well, that didn't help me.
Hi, Mark.
And then go from there.
Hi, Emma. Hey, Pat.
How are you?
Good, good.
Hi, Pat. How are you?
Excellent.
Good.
Yeah. If they paid me as much as they're paying me now for this, I'd be even better. Where am I at? I'm kind of doing, because I'm on my computer, I can't resist doing other jobs, so I'm sort of distracted right now, but I'll be with you in about 2 seconds.
That's okay. I'm just reading some stuff here too as well. Trying to anyway.
No, it's okay.
There, everything's done. This is my third Zoom meeting of the day. I've only got one more to go because they canceled one. I'm soon going to understand what I'm doing.
Well, mine yesterday went
There we go.
about 9 hours, so.
All right, I think I accomplished this modern feat of technology here. So you should be able to see the director's meeting there.
Fine job.
This looks like the hard copy that I have in front of me.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you must be doing something right.
All right. And so we, Mr. Chair, we did have some regrets from Director Kiesebrink as well. So I believe we have everyone in on the conference. Has Angus, Director Ross, been able to join? He's in. Yeah, he's in. Okay, great.
I'm here if you can hear me.
Oh, perfect. Yep, awesome.
Good.
Were there other regrets, Mark?
There were no other regrets, and I think we have everyone else online. So that's great.
So far, I can just see yourself and Directors Dunn and Windover and Hooper, but oh, there we are. Director Ross, Director Seymour Fagan, Director Latham. That's good. Hello, everyone. Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Kathleen, Andy, good. Whoop. What time is it? It's 1 o'clock. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes, sir. I
Good.
can hear you.
Call the meeting to order, and I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Mark, I think you said there was a bit of a change in the agenda, mostly
Yes,
in.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Apologize for this, but in the agenda, you'll see in this location right here, there's a 7.3 that is missing. That was also a feat of modern technological miracles. As we're filling in numbers, we accidentally dropped one of the items from the agenda. So my apologies. 7.3 is the Ken Reid Area Master Plan, the management plan, and there should be a 7.4 4 in there as well, which is the Durham Watershed Planning Water Resources System, and that'll match the material in the agenda.
All right, thank you, and that's good. I'll ask for a motion then to adopt the agenda.
I'll give you that, Mr. Chair.
Director Hooper, do I have a seconder?
Second it.
Director Wendover. I'm going to do it the way I've done before. If there is anyone opposed, please speak up. Hearing none, motion is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Hearing none. We have minutes of our May 28th, 2 meetings on May the 28th, and also our special meeting on June the 11th. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Councillor Ross, make a motion.
All right, thank you, Councillor Ross. Do I have a
You
seconder?
can't see me waiting, so I'll second the motion.
Oh, sorry, Pat, I can't see everyone. I can only, right now, I can only see Angus and Emma and Christy, Kathleen, and Andy.
There you go.
Okay.
For the time being, Mr. Chair, maybe what I'll do is I'll stop sharing the agenda, and that way you can see everyone. And then if there's a specific item we need to go to, then I'll start the screen share again.
Okay, thank you. So that was moved and seconded. Is there anyone opposed to the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, motion is carried. And is there any business arising from the minutes that we won't be covering later on? Hearing none, there's no deputations. And we have presentations, and our first one is on the Durham Watershed Planning Water Resources System. And who's doing that, Mark? Is that?
So through Mr. Chair, we have Emma Collier can produce some introductory remarks, and the author of the report, the primary author, is Brett Trigruno. He's our aquatic biologist, but he also has a number of skill sets which we're particularly happy about, and he works with the planning and regulation crew members quite a bit. He's a certified silt inspector and has a variety of skill sets. So this is one of them. He also, if everyone remembers the lake management plans, he was the primary author and behind those reports as well. So with that, I'll turn over to Emma.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Emma.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, I'm really delighted to present this project to you today. So Brett is going to talk you through the details, but this is a lot of really interesting detail has gone on to this, and you'll see through the mapping as well. So we're really excited about this. I'm not going to say more than that, but I will hand over to Brett, who's been instrumental in leading through this. Over to you, Brett.
Good morning, everybody. Actually, good afternoon, I should say. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I can't show off my wacky COVID hair. Sorry. Still haven't been to get a haircut yet, but thank you for the introduction, Emma and Mark. And what we'll do now is I'll just pull up the presentation. Okay, everybody, can we see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for your time. This will just be a brief 10-minute or so presentation. And as mentioned, the title of this project is the Durham Watershed Planning Project, the Water Resources System. And what this is a special benefiting project for the region Durham, so a capital project for the region of Durham. And I'm just going to go through some of the highlights and a summary of the project. There is a technical report contained within the board agenda, as well as a board report. Just a brief background in terms of the impetus of this project. Durham region, in addition with other municipalities within our jurisdiction have an MOU with all the conservation authorities within their jurisdiction, of course, Kawartha region being one, where we provide advice and our technical expertise on planning services. Because planning services are a delegated responsibility from the province and a key function of the municipalities, they recognize that Kawartha Conservation and all conservation authorities really have specific expertise related to things like natural hazard management, water resources and natural heritage systems planning, and that type of thing. So we have this agreement where we review Planning Act applications, files that come in through the municipality, and we have a commenting function. So it's really a collaborative process, a back and forth to make sure everybody's on the same page. But the planning kind of landscape is really dictated by the province. And of course, there's several land use planning and policy components that the municipality is responsible for. On the left is some key ones that are kind of generally outside the responsibility or the commenting responsibility of Kawartha Conservation. But the ones on the right-hand side, these are the ones that we have, either been delegated responsibility for commenting, but we really have a key stake in. We have expertise in these areas of interest, and whether it's, we also have, a jurisdictional mandate in some of these things as well. Everything from natural hazards, natural heritage, water resources, but also stormwater management, source water protection, responsibilities to other items in local official plans, lake management plans, for example, etc. One we're really focusing on today is really bringing up to snuff our water resources information. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But just back to the land use planning landscape in Ontario, the provincial policy statement, which was just updated, really sets the foundation for planning across the province. And of course, it's a trickle-down effect, so municipalities will have to conform with the policies in this statement. But it doesn't stop there. There are other plans in effect. It's actually quite a complex planning landscape in Ontario. But for our purposes here, kind of the joint jurisdictional overlap between Durham Region and Kawartha Conservation, there's just a few more that are of particular interest within scope of kind of water resources management. So managing our surface and groundwater resources. Of course, the PPS has information related to that. Also, the growth plan, Greenbelt plan, and the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. So all of these planning initiatives or directives have key items related to the management of surface water and groundwater resources. And just in terms of geography, here's just a map of upper tier municipalities or single tier in Southern Ontario. The provincial policy statement covers all of them. The growth plan is a little more focused, right? This is a plan dedicated to where we're going to focus our urban growth, for example. The Greenbelt plan is again a little more focused. Really, its priority is around agriculture and natural heritage systems planning. The Oak Ridges Moraine is even on a more narrower scope, just focused on that, what's often considered the rain barrel of Southern Ontario. And just zooming in terms of the study area here, what's within scope of this project. We've added on the conservation authorities in white. And there we are in terms of the jurisdictional overlap between Durham Region and Kawartha Conservation. there it is there, just kind of zoomed in. And the area we're talking about here is about 1/5 of Durham region, about 20%. And it's also about 1/5 of Kawartha Conservation jurisdiction as well. They've actually have shared surface areas. So it's quite a large stake in each of our respective jurisdictions. Back to the purpose of the Water Resources Systems project. And at the end of the day, it's meant to compile all of our existing information with respect to surface and groundwater features, with the intention of making the review of applications faster and more consistent. And these are things like minor variances, plans of subdivisions, zoning bylaw amendments, but also just our day-to-day interactions with the public through pre-consultations, for example. And you know, for example, if the municipality gets a plan of subdivision in, we're responsible, Kawartha Conservation is responsible through our planning agreement to comment on impacts to the water resource system, for example, and provide those comments to the municipality. So we better have the most up-to-date information with respect to the features on the landscape, the protocols on how they were mapped, and have all this information in one easy to find place so that everybody is working from the same songbook. Everybody knows, for example, that, you know, a particular wetland exists or one doesn't exist, and it's based on the most current information. And at the end of the day, this will be very important, particularly when we play kind of catch up, you know, during and post COVID, in getting our planning and development landscape chugging along again. We don't want to skip a beat. We want to make sure that, that the municipality knows where the resources are that kind of meet these provincial definitions. And in addition, the developers and the consultants, we don't want to waste money and time for them to delineate these features on the landscape. We want to do that ahead of time and direct them, you know, scope it as much as possible. So these help official plan updates as well. It's not just on a day-to-day business, also through, for example, yeah, like the municipal comprehensive review through Envision Durham was a key driver for this process as well. So what are we talking about when we talk about a water resources system? I mentioned surface water and groundwater resources. Here's a definition from the Greenbelt Plan, and it just basically reinforces the need for municipalities to consider this stuff. So near the middle there, it says, you know, appropriate designations and policies shall be applied in official plans to provide for the long-term protection of key hydrologic features, key hydrologic areas, and their functions. This is from the Greenbelt Plan, but very similar language in the Growth Plan and others. And it's these key hydrologic features and hydrologic areas that we're summarizing in this technical report in this presentation. So key hydrologic features are kind of more obvious ones on the landscape, things like permanent intermittent streams, lakes and their shoreline areas, seepage areas and springs, wetlands. And the key hydrologic areas are a little more inconspicuous. They're a little more landscape, landform areas, things like significant groundwater recharge areas, highly vulnerable aquifers, and significant surface water contribution areas. This is all terminology that is the precise wording in these provincial plans. And there's certain definitions that are provided as well. And of course, each of these has policies related to them, and that's why they're specifically defined. For example, you know, for lands within a key natural heritage feature or a key hydrologic feature and the protected countryside of the Greenbelt, the following policies shall apply, you know, X, Y, and Z. Another one example might be, wherever possible, keep intermittent stream channels and drainage swales in a free to grow, low maintenance condition. For lands within a key hydrological area and a protected countryside, the following policies apply. So we need to know at the end of the day where these features and areas are on the landscape. And the best way to do that is through mapping as kind of a screening tool. But we also need to know when we're out there on the ground, that we can actually, delineate these boundaries. So we know, for example, what's within scope of a policy clearly, and clearly what's out of scope. So I'll just briefly show you some mapping and some recommendations from this project. The first one there is permanent intermittent streams. We have, the first step was to basically verify all of our streams within the area. Now we know, for example, if an application comes in, we are very confident on those green lines that we know a surface water feature exists. And so, for example, we might not need to do a site visit, so it saves time. But there's still some gaps in the red there. Some are unassessed, and that's because it's very difficult to determine those from aerial photography. We wanted to get an idea on the ground and not just through aerial photos of these areas. So we went out to every stream road crossing last year and in the summer and determined whether or not it was a perennial or intermittent stream, because this has policy implications as well. And so everything blue there was flowing during the the dog days of summer, and everything yellow there is intermittent. So again, this just helps provide more information. If we have a file, we know right away, okay, there's a surface water drainage feature there, but in certain cases it's more sensitive, it's perennial. In other cases, for example, it's only intermittent, so certain policies would or would not apply. Obviously, there's a discrepancy between surface water drainage features and which ones are actually flowing. A lot of these you drive over in the summer and you wouldn't even notice they're there, but they still do have a policy implication. For example, if a farmer wanted to build a big drive shed to hold some of their machinery, and they applied in the summer, they might say, oh, there's no creek here. But we look at our data and say, oh, actually, we've been out there on a site visit and there is. It just happens to be intermittent.
Brett, if I could. Brett, I have a question.
Well, absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Just on the intermittents, I'm assuming those are probably the ones that could conceivably cause the most discussion between yourself and some landowners. Are those ones that a lot of farmers would look at and say, I want to get that one tile drained because it slows me up in the spring because it's wet there, and I want to put a tile drain down there and solve that perceived problem, or am I thinking of the wrong thing?
Mm-hmm. No, that's through you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. Typically, though, the farmers are aware that these surface drainage features do have the potential to convey a lot of flow.
Yes.
Particularly in the spring, kind of snow melt or after big storm events. So they're generally well aware. What they do tend to do is use these as outlets for tile drains. And it's more the kind of saturated, kind of marginal lands that we might refer to as a wetland that seems to cause more of the debate.
Okay.
But there certainly is a range of conditions going from a creek that would only flow during a heavy rain event, or a ditch, I should say, all the way through the gamut at the other end of the spectrum to a perennial, obvious water course. So there is some debate along the mid gradient of that.
Okay, thank you. That's fine, thank you.
Lake Scugog is the only lake, according to provincial policy, within our jurisdictional overlap. And the borders is kind of split in half between Durham region and City of Kawartha Lakes. And so we did a shoreline survey last year within Durham region to get an idea of the extent of development along the shore. And this is just a brief visual of where we have dominant artificial structures, things like concrete, armor stone walls, that type of thing. And then the green is kind of more natural spaces, things like wetlands, you know, marshes and swamps and that type of thing. Here's a graph just showing the extent of development or artificial, you know, installations along this zone. About 11% of the lake within Durham region is an artificial. The majority of it is remains in natural lands. But a lot of that is undevelopable as well. A lot of, you know, cattail marshes and that type of thing in the southern sections of the lake. Seepage areas and springs, these are areas that if you're ever walking through a forest and you see all of a sudden the creek kind of bubbles out of the ground out of nowhere. This is a key hydrologic feature identified in provincial policy. The mapping for this is basically they only exist for now in Oak Ridges Moraine kind of area in the southern sections of Durham region. There are more out there. They just haven't been mapped yet. So this is the existing mapping and it's quite limited. Wetlands, this is again one that's near and dear to Conservation Authority day-to-day business. Here's a map showing all the wetlands within our jurisdictional overlap, with the green being provincially significant, the blue being locally significant. So both of those have been field verified, the green and the blues. So someone's actually been out there on site. Typically it's the Ministry of Natural Resources. They've evaluated it through a protocol. And if a development application comes in, for example, a Planning Act application, we know that exists. And then we know the significance of those as well. However, there are several others in the red that are unevaluated. And these are the ones up for debate. Similar to what we talked about with the water courses, these are the ones that tend to be inconspicuous on the landscape, tend to change a lot, and really no one's been out there to verify their boundaries on the ground. And there's quite a lot of them out there as well. So just over 40% of all of the wetlands are considered kind of unevaluated. Now, as part of this project, of course, we wanted to fill these gaps. And so last year, we field verified 103 individual wetlands. And we found that most of those red blobs did exist, but there are several others that kind of didn't exist or have been modified since that mapping was first created. Most of these were in agricultural areas, and most of them related to the comment previously have been changed due to changes in agricultural practices, mainly tile draining. Now we get to these hydrologic areas. These are the features along the landscape that are larger. You know, you don't just drive over it. It's kind of a part of the landscape. And the first one is these groundwater recharge areas. And these are the areas that you would associate with the Oak Ridges Moraine, but not necessarily. These are the really porous soils, the sands, the gravels that allow, you know, water to percolate after a rainstorm or, you know, in a snow melt, percolates through the ground, and it recharges all of our wetlands, our creeks, our aquifers, that type of thing. So you can see there, they're quite ubiquitous within this jurisdictional overlap, but highly concentrated along the Oak Ridges Moraine boundaries. Another area is these highly vulnerable aquifers, and it's very similar to significant groundwater recharge areas. In this case, it's focused around the aquifers that we obtain our water from. So it's related to typically, you know, groundwater water sources. You know, for example, Port Perry gets their water from a groundwater source, and most of the people that live within this jurisdictional areas obtain their water from aquifers. there's a map there showing all the blue, what's considered a highly vulnerable aquifer in the jurisdictional overlap. The yellow are the wellhead protection areas. The last one is also a key hydrologic area, and that's the significant surface water contribution areas. And the point here is that certain areas on the landscape contribute more proportionally to the creeks. They contribute more water. And so through our flow sampling last year as part of this project at all culvert and all road stream crossings, we measured flow, and we basically compared the results against each other. And these are all, what's showing here is small little catchments that drain all of our sample sites. And these dark red is the top third percentile. So these watersheds contribute the most per unit area of flow in our creeks. So these are really sensitive areas, typically the headwaters. So the origins of our major creeks like the Nonquan River, East Cross Creek, Blacksaw Creek, all these kind of high profile creeks. In these small catchments here, this is where they generate most of their water from. That's just a brief summary of our mapping and our findings. All that information is in the technical report, along with the specific definitions, any key findings, the mapping methodology. So if there's any questions, if a planner or a consultant or an applicant has any questions, how was this delineated, or what's your current information, we have it all in an easily accessible place. But there are some recommendations, some next steps for this. And the first one is to share this information, present this information to some of the technical staff at Durham Region and in the lower tier municipalities as well. Centralize all this information through an easy to use mapping tool. We have mapping tools available. For example, CA Maps is one that we use. Municipalities use ones as well. What we're looking at doing is just, and we have all the information, it's a relatively easy process, just compile it all in a clickable fashion. So you can click on a layer, right away you get where are all the wetlands. You can turn it on and off, you can overlap them all. It would be very helpful for a developer, for example, or the municipality. And we know the landscape's changing. We know there are certain subdivisions, for example, being proposed or coming down the pipes. We mentioned the changes in agriculture. So some of this information needs to be kind of field verified a little further, particularly in those red areas that I had that were kind of unverified, or some of the remaining wetlands. But we also need to routinely update them. Once you have a tile drain put in, for example, that wetland feature may no longer exist. If that farmer wants to change their land use down the road, our mapping should reflect that, or else if it needs to be updated at the time of application, it's kind of more brief and a more hiccup in the process. So it'd be nice to do that on a routine basis, every few years, for example, to keep this information up to date. Last slide, in terms of our work plan for 2020, I mentioned that sharing this information is going to be particularly important. Because wetlands, there are so many of them on the landscape, we really want to field verify some of those unconfirmed wetlands. And in addition, at the start, I mentioned that natural heritage features is also a key, it's also a key component within our commenting responsibility. And we want to do something similar with that as well. So we know exactly where, all of our fish habitat is, all of our provincially significant wetlands, our areas of natural and scientific interest, all these other natural heritage features, and a very similar approach to this as well. So we have them all in one easily to access location and mapping tool. So thank you for your attention, and that is the presentation.
Thank you, Brett. Is there anyone have any questions for Brett?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Hooper.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brett, for your presentation. That's very enlightening. And I just have one question in regards to the measurements and all that. Is this all done by LiDAR, or how is it that people don't physically go in and do all these mappings and by walking on the property and things like that? It's all done by LiDAR, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's a little bit of column A and column B.
Okay.
LiDAR has actually not been applied to this project. That's another tool that we've kind of recently been derived from our floodplain mapping. And so down the road, we look at that as a really great opportunity to identify and refine the location of surface water drainage features. But there has been a significant effort to field verify some of these features as best as we can at the road crossings. I mentioned that we sampled flow, for example, at the road crossings. So that was a significant endeavor where we would go with our monitoring equipment at every culvert or bridge. And the wetland verification was done by the road. So in some cases, with the undulating topography, you can really get a good view of the landscape without going on someone's private property. But that does, you're right, that only takes us so far. And it's only meant to inform the screening purposes. So we wanted, red, yellow, or green flags when we're talking with somebody or the municipality. When the going gets tough with respect to, strict policies, or if it's going to affect somebody's pocketbook, we want to make sure that we conduct a site visit to ensure that some of these features are, in scope.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Right, thank you. Is there any more questions for Brett? Hearing none, thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
For your work there, and maybe while I still have you, I will ask one more question. You mentioned early in the presentation about some of the changes that have been made to I'll use the word streamline or speed up the application process. Do you still feel that things are being done thoroughly, or is there any concern that some changes have resulted in things not being done as well as they should have been?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think I'll defer that to Ron Warren. He'd be in a better position to answer that.
All right, thank you. Ron, please.
Yes, through the chair. It's great to have these tools where everything is summarized in one place. And it's actually a more elaborate document than I had thought. I played a small role and my team in helping Brett, but when everything's like this in one spot, it makes a significant difference, especially in terms of being able to get back to general inquiries from the public in a short amount of time. Usually if it's an application if it's a comment on a Planning Act application, we have a deadline and we have resources available to us. But sometimes people just come in or send an email and they want as much information as they could get right away. And something like this really makes a difference.
All right, that's good. So it does contribute to customer satisfaction is what it amounts to, really. And good, thank you. There are no further questions of Brett or Ron. I'm going to turn it over to Christy to walk us through the Ken Reid management plan.
Mr. Chair, give me just one moment, and I now am I running things, Mark?
Yes, Christy, you should have the controls.
I don't get to be in control very often. This is fun. Okay. There we go. Can everyone see the presentation okay?
Thank you. There's some background noise on someone. I don't think everyone is muted that maybe should be. Please, go ahead, Christy.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the board for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation today. Anna is our author of the Ken Reid Management Plan, and back in February to being able to make the presentation to the board, or I guess it was April, but unfortunately, you know, we weren't able to get there. So I'm going to take the lead on presenting this on her behalf this afternoon, and I look forward to.
Christy?
Yes.
Would you be able to turn off your video only? Still share your screen. You're breaking up a little bit still.
Oh, okay. I can certainly try. How's that? Thank you.
Great. That should reduce your bandwidth and hopefully improve things. Thanks.
Very much. So the board has seen the draft management plan back in February of this year, where we were bringing it forward for endorsement for the circulation to the community. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, that board meeting didn't go forward and we didn't get to the actual draft. So that's where we are right now, is in the February 2020 slide section of this presentation, looking for your endorsement so that we can circulate this this document through to our stakeholders to get some comments and to bring it forward for a final endorsement. So as you know, Ken Reid is our flagship conservation area. We acquired the property back in 1981. It was, and a management plan was done in 1983. And what we've noticed, obviously, is over the course of time, values have changed, conservation values have changed, things like climate change have come forward, and you know, have presented a number of challenges for conservation management. As well, community values have changed, and the way that we use our conservation areas is changing from when this original management plan was put in place. So we undertook the process of doing management plan, making sure that it is sort of headed in the same direction that we want to go, that it's still aligned with our community values, and that it's still addressing some of those current conservation challenges that we have. And so through this process, we reaffirmed our vision and our mission and all of those sorts of things. And we took a look at what are the goals for the conservation area. And really looking at it, we said, you know, there's two main goals, two main purposes for having Ken Reid Conservation Area. One, of course, is protecting our natural features. So the provincially significant wetland, as well as some of those key habitats and natural areas. And the other one is connecting our community. So providing our community with that opportunity to connect to nature in a way that's meaningful and inspiring for them. And really those two goals aren't mutually exclusive. They really become intertwined quite a bit. And as we worked through the goal or the priorities for each of these goals, the priority actions, we realized that they really did intertwine and they really did complement each other quite nicely. So after going through the goals, we took a look at a number of different recommendations. And so through the process of consulting with the community and doing some community consultation, we came up with 10 different recommendations and 45 actions that help us to implement some of those recommendations. So you can see here, we split them off into 5 for each of the goals. And And, you know, when we look at things like the implementation of management zones, it was really about, you know, making sure that we're creating spaces and opportunities for future development, whether that be for the development of restoration projects or for the development of the conservation area to allow for community interaction with nature. But also things like trail management really sort of goes both sides of those goals. So there's the protection aspect of it, which is, you know, making sure that our trails are in the right place, that we have the proper infrastructure. If we need to put in a raised boardwalk in order to reduce soil compaction, that we do that. Making sure that our trail management is done in a way that helps to create some of those opportunities for connection to our community. And so some of those might be things like improving the accessibility of our trails in order to allow for all of our community to access our conservation areas. So I'm just going to highlight two of those recommendations for you here this afternoon. The first one being our management zones, and I talked about it briefly. You can see we've got a number of different areas. We have our natural areas, natural reserve areas, which are these yellow areas on the map. These are really areas that are sort of off for the public, or that we have very, very passive. There may be an existing trail through them, but we're not looking to implement any additional trails. We have passive recreation zones. So these are zones that we've identified would be really great opportunities for future enhancement of existing trail networks or existing infrastructure in order to create opportunities for the community to come out and interact with nature. Alternate use zones, dark blue areas. And these are areas that we've set aside that we said, you know, there's opportunities here. Right now, they're being used more from a passive recreation standpoint. In some cases, there's no access in this area here. There's really no community access to that part of our conservation area. But when we look at opportunities to expand and to implement some of the other recommendations, things like perhaps feature on the property or access, you know, boat launches and that sort of thing. These are areas where it may make some sense to investigate doing some of those alternative uses. So we've left those, we've identified those within the plan, and, you know, as move forward and as we go look into the financial impacts of them as well as the environmental impacts of them, we'll make some decisions as to whether or not we're going to move forward in those areas. And of course, we have our intensive use, and that's that pink area. That's our driveway, our administrative building, our workshop and compound, as well as the dog park area. So these are all areas that have quite a bit of infrastructure already in place. Really don't see that we're going to be changing the use of those areas into the future. And then from when we look at the connecting side, when we look at some of the opportunities for implementation, we really looked at enhancing the user experience. So, you know, that can be a number of things. I talked about, you know, the potential for some camping sites, which certainly the board identified as part of one of our presentations to the board. But there's also things, you know, like equipment rentals, and maybe there's an opportunity to work with local businesses and local business owners to facilitate some rentals of equipment so that people can experience things like snowshoeing or cross-country skiing on the conservation area, even though they don't necessarily own the equipment themselves, as well as things like infrastructure accessibility. So we've already put in 2 accessible washrooms as well as some accessible trails in the conservation area, but really looking towards to address some of washrooms that are fairly small that would make accessibility. So looking at, you know, making some adjustments to those into the future. That's really all I have for you. I know that you've taken a look at the plan in the early stages. This is, you know, sort of where we've landed at this point in time. I encourage everyone to take a really good look at the management plan, and please, If you have questions, if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet and you do have some questions later on, please feel free to contact me. And we're really excited about this. We're really excited about the implementation of it. Our partners are really excited about the implementation of it, and a lot of the comments that we've had and communication that we've had with those partners has been around the operationalization of some of those recommendations. You know, what kinds of things are we going to be doing to integrate into, you know, the tourism aspect of our community and that sort of thing. So I really welcome any questions or comments that you have.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you and Emma for your work on this. Are there questions for Christy?
Mr. Chair, it's Andy. If I can ask a question.
Go ahead, Director Letham.
Thank you. Christy, thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it. I had a quick question. I noticed that in your report, you say that our 14 hectares, not you say, but 14 hectares are City of Kawartha lakes adjoining, and you have an agreement to maintain or look after that property. I'm struggling on the map to see where that is, and I'm wondering if you can pull up some satellite photo or something and show us where you talk about acquisition of adjacent properties. I'm assuming that's one of the ones you're talking about. And I would love to see where that is adjacent to Kawartha Conservation. And I guess my second question is, has the Conservation Authority ever approached the City of Kawartha Lakes about donating that piece of land as opposed to acquiring it? Not that that's my decision to make, but I would love to see it, you know, go through our system and our land management and just see what some of the hurdles one way or other are. But so just two questions there.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to go back to my presentation here and bring back the map. The section, can you see that? Okay.
You're breaking up a bit, Christy.
Sorry, can you see the map okay?
Yes.
So when you look at, it's all black on my screen. I apologize. I'm having some technical difficulty.
Same here.
It's black on mine too as well.
Yeah, okay, hang on just a moment. Mark, would it be possible for someone else to pull that map up? You've got control back, I think, now.
Yep. Thanks, Christy. We're just working on it right here. I've brought up the presentation, so
thank you.
So I am just going to share my screen here.
I thought maybe that was a satellite picture taken at night.
Yeah.
So all things going well, you should be able to see the screen there.
Right. So Mark, if you can just point out sort of the beach area of the property, which is the part that we currently lease. Yep. From, we have that long-term lease from the City of Kawartha Lakes. So it's right in that area there, Andy. That's actually where we put the accessible washrooms recently. So last year and the year before, we implemented the accessible washrooms in that area. But that used to be the beach area. It's now sort of a playground area that we do manage on behalf of the city through a long-term lease. And we have a number of years ago, we talked to the city about the potential for a donation. I think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the lease goes to 2025.
Yes, I believe it does go. It's coming up. I would say reasonably soon. But Director Letham, I totally hear your comments. When we use the term acquisition, we're thinking of it in a very broad, general term, and donation is something that we would be very happy to receive if the city was willing. And as you mentioned, if there were no hurdles to that end.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I have a question on the same map, if I could, please.
Sure. I'm just going to share it again here. There you go.
It just towards the end of the long blue section, there's what looks like a spit or something. Is that natural or man-made, or what is that?
if you can hear me, okay, I'll make an attempt. If I start to break up, Mark, you can jump in. That is the remnants of the old Marsh Road. So it was an old project that was brought in place. They were trying to connect, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, is that correct?
Yeah, it's the old mud road. What they were trying to do is actually connect one side of Lindsay to Fenland Falls, a little bit of a shorter path. So they were actually trying to create a roadway, but the sediment was a little bit soft, and I think in the end it was just abandoned. So there's actually this is the fill that was dredged up and then put in that area. There's something similar on the opposite side. I would imagine that the bridge cost would have been something that would have been fairly expensive to achieve as well. So it is a little spit of sorts.
All right, thank you. Is there any further questions? All right, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And I just got to bring it up on my screen here. The recommended resolution is that resolved that the presentations on Durham Watershed Planning and Ken Reid Management Plan be received. Can I have a motion regarding that, please? Moved by Director Wendover, seconded by Director Moore. Is there anyone opposed to that? Hearing none, I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you. And next on the agenda is permits issued by the designated staff. Have a recommended resolution is that the following Section 28 permits were issued by staff last month. And that all those permits be received and that the permitting performance report be received. Can I have a motion for that, please? Director Moore? I can see some hands and others I can't, so.
Director Ross, a second.
Okay, Director Ross seconds. Is there anyone opposed to that? Thank you, the motion is carried. Mark, would it be possible to put the agenda up again, please?
Yep, absolutely.
And the next item on the agenda is the large fill permit renewal for Highway 35 on Colburn Street in Lindsay. I recommend a resolution is resolved that the existing large fill permit 2017-230, which expired on September 6, 2019 to Craft Development Corporation, be extended to September 6, 2022. Could I have a motion regarding that?
Yeah, it's Andy. I'll move that.
Moved by Director Lethem. We have a second.
It's Kathleen, I'll second it.
Kathleen, now, is there any discussion on that? I'll ask a question if no one else is. The fact that this permit and the hauling in of the fill has been slower than anticipated, which of course has led to the extension on the permit. How has that affected our operation in terms of staffing? Like, do we have we had to have a staff person somewhat dedicated or available, I'll use the word, to monitor the fill that we sort of assumed was going to happen in a much shorter time period? We were given that impression it was going to happen in a much shorter time period. Now we have to have someone doing it for an extra couple of years. Does that have an impact on our staff or our budget? And is there, I'm assuming probably no more fill than it originally anticipated is going to come in, or not much change that way, but the time frame is much longer. So I guess I'll give that question to Mr. Mahowski or Mr. Warren, whoever wants to handle it.
Yep, sure. I'll start and see if maybe Ron has anything to add. we're not anticipating any extra costs associated with the extension. So in terms of the dollars and cents, a lot of that goes to a consultant in order to help us manage that. But we do have a couple of staff within the office that are geared towards helping out with this large fill kind of application to the property. So if anything, this has affected previous years where the revenue that we would have anticipated on the from the work done in order to make sure that the project was accomplished was not recognized in previous years. So it's a matter of it just being recognized in the years to come. So it's been spread out as a result over 5 years versus the original 2. But like I say, the dollar amount remains the same.
All right. Thank you. And so, and that's mostly then covered by a consultant doing it on behalf of the Conservation Authority.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding that?
Mr. Chair, it's Andy. I'll just add to your comments. I can, with a high degree of confidence, tell you that over the next couple of weeks, you're going to see that project ramping up considerably. They're just at the point where they've got tenders out for all the earthworks, and that's closing on Monday. And they're going to award that contract, and they're looking to start going there toward the second half of the summer and through the fall. So I think you'll see lots of activity there in the near future.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. It's Councillor Hooper. It's just in regards to the consultant. How is that fee structure worked out there in regards to? Is that only on how much fill we get in, or is it a contracted thing that he's always there, or how is that working out? Like as far as his fee structure and things like that.
For that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron Warren. But you're right. It is in relation to the amount of fill and the consultant. There was a report that went to our board actually. I believe at the outset of this that identified the consultant with the various kind of charges and disbursements identified. But I'll turn over to Ron Warren here.
Thank you.
Just to elaborate on what Mark had said, there was a fee schedule approved by the board and a qualified professional chosen to be our eyes on the project. It is entirely tied to fill volumes. And then we are provided with a report back from that qualified professional on a I won't say monthly, but it's sort of been like a quarterly basis. It will be a little bit more frequently right now because the fill volumes are also more frequent. And at that point, it's really just the our compliance officer and myself constantly review those, and we are also in good connection with the proponent as well.
Okay, thank you. And just one final question in regards to, it's still Mason Homes is still involved with this project, correct?
Through the chair again, to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe Mason Homes is involved in either the fill or they may be involved in the residential portion of the development, but I don't have any confirmation of that.
Okay, thank you.
For sure not involved in the filling at this point.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but I just
Ron, it's Andy, if I might, Mr. Chair. Craft Developments bought the property from Mason Homes several years ago. Craft Developments is doing the commercial portion of the development, and Kingsman Homes out of Toronto is doing the residential portion. So it's actually two different development proposals, but Mason is not involved in them and either of them any longer.
Well, that's good. And to add to Mayor Letham's comments, finally you can see some progress eventually happening to that piece of property. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a struggle, but I think you're going to see some stuff going on there over the next 6 months. So very exciting time for us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. If there's no further questions, is there anyone that opposed to that motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. And item 7.3 is regarding the Ken Reid Conservation Area Management Plan and asking that it be endorsed for stakeholder consultation. Could I have a motion regarding that, please?
I give you that, Mr. Chair.
That was Director Hooper.
Yes, sir.
All right, do I have a seconder, please? Director Dunn? Is there any discussion? Anyone opposed? Hearing none, I'll declare the motion carried. And I just have to scroll through some stuff here. The next one is on the Durham Watershed Planning Project, Water Resources System. And the recommended resolution is that be received, and we essentially did that earlier, didn't we, Mr. Mahowski?
That was through Mr. Chair. That was the presentation that was received. So this is officially receiving the report itself.
All right, could I have a motion regarding that then, please? Director Windover?
Councillor Ross, seconds.
Councillor Ross? Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. These are consent items, and I've been going through them one at a time, haven't I? Sorry about that. Well, we're almost through them now anyway. The CAO's report. I'll ask the motion to. I just have to get caught up on my agenda here. I have my laptop with the Zoom meeting and the presentations on it, and then on an old tablet here, I've got the full agenda that I scroll through. So the recommended resolution, I guess we've done 4 of them of the 6 consent items. Might as well do them one at a time now. We're almost done. Recommended resolution is that the CAO report be received. Do I have a motion on that, please?
So moved. It's Andy.
Moved by Director Leffman. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
Director Hooper. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Was there? I should have asked if there was any questions. I assume you're comfortable enough that if there are questions, you'll speak up. So motion is carried. And the last one is being correspondence, and I'll ask for a motion to receive the correspondence.
Councillor Ross makes the motion.
All right, Councillor Ross. Seconded by Director Moore. Any opposed? Motion carried. Action item is now the Lake Bug Enhancement Project. And just going to bring it up on my own here. Recommended resolution is that the Lake Scugog Enhancement Project update be received and that a special project funding request be submitted to the Region of Durham on behalf of the project. Could I have a motion regarding that, please?
Councillor Ross, I'll make that motion.
Councillor Ross, could I have a seconder, please? Director Windover. Mr. Mahowski or Emma, will you, either one of you, care to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll mention a few things just at the outset, and if Emma has anything to add, certainly turn the floor over to her. The Lake Scugog Enhancement Project, I think this has gone to to you as a board several times. It's a pretty exciting project for the township of Scugog, and specifically for any residents that go to Port Perry or live on the lake. This is a big project which involves a significant dredging project. So that will actually enhance the lakefront area in the immediate area of the Port Perry Bay, which is really Port Perry proper. So from the main drag, you can actually see the lake, and a lot of the businesses really depend on that lake for their economic purposes. It's also used as a central area for a number of events, and so what's been seen is that over a number of years, there's been a couple of events where it's been put in jeopardy. The number of weeds, technically my aquatic biologist would not be happy about that term. The aquatic plants that grow there are extremely abundant. And so the dredging project will deepen the lake in that area, will produce a better scenario, and it also involves the dredging being turned into a wetland area, like sort of like a lacustrine lake-based wetland. So that is that's what the project is about. We'll facilitate a number of community events, a big economic driver for the area, and solve a number of issues. The marina is also there, so a ton of boat traffic in the area. We'll also address some stormwater issues that the town has. There's a lot of uncontrolled runoff that doesn't really follow any of the modern means or modern technology. So it really runs right through the catch basin system right into the lake, and so this project will also help to address that. So in discussions with the region of Durham, there was a presentation that was made earlier this year to the Finance and Admin Committee. It received a lot of favorable response there, and so the area that we're targeting as a group is a community fund that Durham Region has. So I should mention this is a collaborative between Township of Scugog, ourselves as Conservation Authority, and a very important partner, which is the Kawartha Lake Stewards. So they're doing a tremendous job in the fundraising aspect. And what we'd like to see is a third commitment from provincial federal government, a third locally from the township and the region, and then a third actually of the project costs, which is upwards of $5 million, actually raised through the local community. So it's a pretty big project, and we see this as a really key component of moving this forward. So the township, in their discussions with the region, thought that we would be in a better position to ask the region of Durham for this community fund.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Emma, would you like to chime in?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not much to add really to what Mark has said. I think, as you probably gathered, it's quite a complicated project. We've recently participated on a multi-agency meeting. I think we had over 25 members on that call, so various federal and provincial agencies. So this is looking like pushing our construction period into 2021. So we're working towards that now. But we've been very successful in gaining funding through the Greenbelt Foundation. So we're looking to gather additional funds for this project to make it very exciting and get that delivered as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Is there any questions for Emma?
Mr. Chair, it's Angus, if I can ask a couple questions. Just two quick questions. It says the Township of Scugog suggesting that the project would find more success if Kawartha made submission. Did they identify why that would be more successful?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was not identified specifically. I know the township was originally looking at doing that, but I think it was really in discussions with Durham Regional. I think it was the finance staff. They were looking at it, and I would assume that because it's a community fund, that having another agency other than a municipality might make more of an impact.
Okay, great. And just further to that, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, Just simply, where did the 2 million come from? Why aren't we looking at 2.5, 3, or less? If you could just maybe identify that again for me.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, the $2 million is an ask. I think it's right around where we're trying to look for, about a third of the project. So there's a bunch of work to be done, and $2 million is I would say a very healthy request. I know the money that's in the Durham Community Chest it doesn't have a whole lot more than that in it right now, if I remember right. So we are looking at a pretty significant request from that community fund.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other questions on this project? Hearing none, are there any opposed to the endorsing of it? Hearing no opposition, I'll declare the motion carried. And we're now down to, on the agenda, to new business. Is there any new business? Hearing none. Does anyone of the board members like to give any report or update on activities or issues in your areas? Hearing none, I'll report that it's very dry here in Brock, and please send some rain our way. And that finishes item number 10. Number 11 is the closed session, and I'll ask for a motion to go into closed.
I'll give you that, Mr. Chair.
That was Director Hooper. Seconded by Director Dunn. Anyone opposed? All right, motion is carried. We will be entering the close, but we will have to